Hello, good morning, everyone. I am here today to express my profound gratitude for the healing and spiritual community that I have been blessed with through my involvement with Shumei and Joe-Ray. 9 years ago, I began to experience a period of intense purification. After a successful career as a field biologist and conservation ecologist, a second master's degree, and 20 years of Buddhist meditation practice, at the age of 50, I suddenly became highly reactive to airborne chemicals. Realized quickly that I had developed multiple chemical sensitivities and was soon after diagnosed with that condition. A night in a newly built house hypersensitized me to chemicals to the extent that I experienced often debilitating symptoms, especially brain fog and headache, almost every time I entered a building. My body systems were overloaded with toxins, and my body said no more. My condition made it difficult to spend more than a short time in most buildings. I was forced to adopt an extreme low-carbohydrate diet because my sensitivities, fatigue, brain fog, and intestinal distress all got worse if I ate carbohydrate-rich foods like rice, pasta, sweets, fruit, or potatoes. Over the 2 to 3 years that followed that fateful event, I also developed several chronic conditions, including severe hormonal imbalances, chronic fatigue syndrome, insomnia, and significant intestinal problems like parasites. After 5 years of attempting a myriad of approaches, modalities, therapies, and supplements, and trying to support myself through work, ultimately unsuccessfully, it seems I was not any better, and in fact, my fatigue was getting worse. Around that time, when I finally surrendered to the situation of being unable to support myself due to my condition, I also discovered through a mysterious series of synchronicities and dreams that at least some of my problems were related to long-term exposure to toxic indoor mold. I found a mold specialist doctor who diagnosed me with toxic mold illness, also known as chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and I began treatment under the protocol for that condition. Shortly thereafter, though, I had to abandon the casita that I had been renting in the co-housing community that I love in Santa Fe due to toxic mold growth in the casita. Fortunately, I am an experienced camper, and I ended up camping out for a time that summer in Crestone, where I discovered Joe-Ray and Shumei. What a blessing that discovery has been. When I receive Joe-Ray, my mind settles down more quickly than when I meditate by myself, and I find calm. After my first Joe-Ray session, I felt more relaxed, more energized, and more joyful. And at that time, I needed all of those. So, the 3-month student who was giving me the tour there said I could come back. So I came back for more. I soon noticed that the spiritual healing effects of Joe-Ray spilled over into the realm of physical health. And that, day after day of receiving Joe-Ray, resulted in consistent small improvements in my health. Joe-Ray boosted my life force, which decreased my environmental sensitivities, made it easier to digest foods, and increased my energy levels. Looking back on my amazing recovery in the last 4 years, I can see that the turning point toward sustainable and sustained healing and recovery was my first experience of Jōrei. Since I received my ohikari in October 2015, many miracles and blessings have showered upon me in the form of helpful healing modalities that do not break my bank, compatible work opportunities, financial gain, and housing that I can tolerate. Hoshi has been an important facet of my experience with Shumei. After a year and a half of healing and recovery, including nearly a year sleeping outdoors in a tent, I went to Crestone Center for an extended period of Hoshi. A few weeks into the Hoshi residence period, my sister in Oregon called to inform me that she had been diagnosed with a grave medical condition. I had already been aware that 6 months prior, my mother had to move out of her house in Washington State due to dementia and was now living with my sister and brother-in-law in their house in Oregon. My sister was my mother's primary caregiver, and now this illness on top of it. My sister and I had always been close, and I decided, after consulting with Alan Sensei, that the Hoshi I was now called to was with my family. I was grateful to be well enough at the time to know that I could be helpful to them. So I drove to Oregon from Arizona, where I was living at the time, and I got to work. There, in addition to giving my sister and mother Jōrei whenever possible, I went to Lakewood, Washington, and was able to get my mother's house, the home which I grew up in from age 5 onward, ready for sale, something no one else in the family had time for. The house sold quickly and for a good price. Then I returned to Oregon to stay with my sister and give her Jōrei daily while she went through a second surgery and a lengthy recovery. My mother, a longtime dedicated Catholic, found Jōrei very relaxing, and it would put her to sleep, just what she needed because she never seemed to be able to get enough of sleep at that time. Eventually, my sister realized that she could not continue to be a live-in caregiver for my mother and simultaneously give herself the care she needed to recover from her illness. So then my work shifted from finding in-home caregivers to finding an appropriate assisted living community for my mother, which, with her gracious help, I was able to do. The doctors have declared that my sister's surgeries were successful, and she has returned to a very full and engaged life with a renewed sense of the importance of healthy eating and balanced living. Shumei staff Naoko, Masayo, and Ron came to visit us in Oregon many times. What a blessing that was. After 6 months in Oregon, helping out as I could, I returned to Arizona, where I had been living previously. There, I discovered work as a birding guide that I enjoyed, that combined my love of nature and people, that provided some needed income, and that brought joy to those who I served. I had a bit of a purification last summer in Tucson, and I found myself sickened by the apartment that I had recently rented. I found myself once again homeless for a time and living out of my tent, as I had before. This time, though, my prayers for a safe new place to live were shortly answered after I attended the Pasadena anniversary last year and found a healthy house back in New Mexico, the state I was forced to abandon due to my condition and the winter weather 4 years prior. Lately, I continue to be amazed at the gradual and steady improvements in my health and ability to be engaged. Last spring, I returned to Southeast Arizona for a 6-week stint working full-time and beyond as a birding guide. This included a 6-day trip for a group of 9 people from the Tahoma Audubon Society in Tacoma, Washington, the place where I grew up and the place where I began my birding as a young child. What a blessing that was to have that experience of coming full circle. Lately, I have been more confident and able to sleep indoors in a variety of situations, something that most take for granted, but that was unthinkable even 2 years ago. Shumei has provided a rich experience of spiritual community for me, for which I am very grateful. While living in community and doing Hoshi, both in Crestone and at the Hollywood Center, my interactions with others were constant reminders of the importance of cultivating gratitude and generosity on a minute-to-minute basis. Sharing Jo-Rei whenever I have the opportunity has also been a great gift and inspiration. I experience Jo-Rei as divine, unconditional love in action and an act of beauty. Recently, a new miraculous opportunity occurred, and I am now working at Shumei's Crestone Center. I really did not think that this dream of mine was even a real-world possibility, yet it has come to pass. I am so humbled to be able to be of service in such a full and consistent way to the ideals of Meishu-sama's teachings. I cannot think of anything better to do at this time of great change with my life. I want to close by extending gratitude to all the Shumei community who have befriended me and supported me in myriad ways over these last 4 years. Especially, I want to thank my spiritual mother, Kurumi, the senseis Eugene Imai, Alan Imai, and Koji Nakamura for their support, encouragement, and wisdom. Kei Sasaki and Yumi Schrader in Arizona, who kept my Shumei connection alive while I was living in Arizona for 3 years. Tom Berkes for exchanging Jo-Rei with me regularly while I lived in Santa Fe recently. Naoko Iwamoto and Masayo Sugimoto, who have provided support from both near and far, and my friends and coworkers at the Crestone Center. Thank you.